Okay. So let's see. Okay, here people are joining in. Hello, everyone. Take your time. Take a virtual seat. I'm gonna switch off my camera in the meantime. Okay. We're about to start, and you can see that the presenters are on the starting blocks, ready to go. Okay. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at Gala. Today's webinar is a presentation by Luz Pineda, Senior Technical Project Manager Localization, and Geneviève Bolduc, Localization Developer at Motorola. Remember that during the webinar, you can use the QA box to submit your questions. You can also submit your questions anonymously if you prefer, but please keep in mind an etiquette, of course. And at the end of the presentation, we will address as many questions as we can. The webinar will be recorded, and I'll share the link in a follow-up email after the event. And the recording will also be published on the Gala website. Luz and Geneviève, I'm going to leave the floor to you because you have a lot to tell us. So
yes,
good luck.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Isabella. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Everybody gets a screenshot. Today, we would like to share some of our experiences using screenshots to enable linguistic quality and also for linguistic testing purposes, and how this is possible through using automation. This is roughly the agenda that we would like to cover, but I'm pretty sure as questions arise, we may have to tweak here and there. So we're going to tell you who we are and basically the reasons why we do the things we do. The challenges that we face, the way that we mitigate some of the risks that sometimes encounter on a daily basis, and also how we conduct linguistic testing using automation of taking screenshots. Jen will give you the very detailed tasks that she executes on a regular basis to make this possible. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A session in case you have any questions. So let's get this started. Who we are. We work for a company called Avigilon. This company develops artificial intelligence-powered video management solutions, access control systems, and incident management solutions. We are part of the Motorola Solutions mission-critical ecosystem, designed primarily for public safety and enterprise security. And please try to remember this: public safety and enterprise security. We'll explain why later. We are part of the localization and technical documentation team. Paula Hunter, our boss, started the Avigilon localization program in 2013. I joined a couple of years after that, and no longer after, Eduardo also joined us as a project manager. And Jen is one of our success stories. She joined the company initially as an intern or co-op, as we call them here in Canada. She was still a student. And soon after finishing her degree, she joined permanently the localization team as localization developer. Sammy is our current intern, and he will be with us for at least 6 months. So that's great. As you can see, we work in partnership with 3 LSPs. We localize, adapt, and man translations. And in fact, is one of these companies we localize that executes the linguistic testing for us. And last but not least, we have a growing number of in-country reviewers. They are all part of the global sales team and other partners. Now, what kind of contents we localize on a regular basis? Well, we localize everything that our technical writers produce. Software user guides, installation guides, you name it. I'm not going to read all of them. We also localize marketing collateral and the digital experience, meaning websites, social media, emails, everything that the marketing team asks us for help in localizing their content. And finally, the main content type for today's discussion is our software. Our team is responsible for the localization of all the software developed by Avigilon. We work on a significant number of solutions that need to be localized in different languages, meaning not all the products are localized in the same language set. Our software is developed in an array of different platforms like Windows, Linux, but we also have mobile solutions like ACC and ACM Mobile and cloud-based solutions. Based on these facts, as you can imagine, we deal with almost every file format under the sun. So what exactly our team is responsible for? Our main responsibility is to provide accurate translations for the software UI. And also we have to verify that the software UI displays correctly in all supported locales. In this graphic, you can see we are responsible for the UI localization and linguistic testing. And the development teams and the QA teams are responsible for the actual localization testing. And we share the responsibility of the software internationalization. The way it works is as the localization team, we provide guidance and best practices for internationalization and localization, but the developers are actually the ones implementing this advice into their code. And that's basically how we work. Of course, you may think, well, it's just linguistic testing, but there are some challenges given given the nature of our software, really. And these are some of the main challenges. Quality. Earlier, we talked about how our software is used in public safety and enterprise security. So there is very little room for error when it comes to quality. We require of a high degree of technical accuracy. We often tell our linguists, we don't want you to write poems. We just want you to write something that is technically accurate and is adapted to your own locale. Also, the terminology that we have to handle based on this, on the type of software that we develop, there are so many terms that there is so much room for ambiguity. So we have to make absolutely sure that we provide the context so our translators can do the best job they possibly can. And one of the main challenges is really the testing environments. In order, as you probably are familiar, when it comes to linguistic testing, you need to use testing environments that are similar to the ones the end users will use in real life. The user interface in our software is very complex in the sense that you need to have different pieces of hardware attached and connected to your system. And even those pieces of software need to be in different states if you are going to see all the strings within a scope at any particular release. Let me give you an example. The strings that you see when you are watching a live video are going to be different to the UI that you will see when you are watching recorded video. So they have different strings and you have to be able to move from camera to camera in order to see those strings. Also, you may need to have enabled features, for example, license plate recognition. It has to be enabled in order to see the user interface related to that particular feature. And we also have mobile applications that need to be tested, not just in one mobile, but different, a mix of a platform, Android and iOS, and different screen sizes, for example, especially when it comes to checking for layout issues. So before we go into the next slide, let's conduct a little poll. Isabella, if you can help us, please.
Yes, I think the poll is visible now. So the question is, which linguistic QA approach are you currently using or have used in the past to ensure linguistic quality in software UI? Let's see. Let's give it half a minute. And the answers are full linguistic testing, test only for layout issues, release localized software without testing, or other. And if you choose other, please let us know in the chat. Okay. Let's see. So we have 83% full linguistic testing, and then 14% release localized software without testing. So I'm gonna show the results for a second.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, well, yeah, so earlier we were talking about how difficult it was to get a proper testing environment open to a third-party external testing team. So I can relate. It's not that difficult to imagine that sometimes we need to release a localization without testing. It has happened in our case. So what do we do in order to mitigate the risk of having or getting bad translations into our software? We try to start early, very early QA. And as you, some of you might be familiar, most of the errors, when it comes to translations, a good number of errors are the result of poorly written source language. It's just a fact. If the English is not clear, is ambiguous, most likely you are going to get really bad results in the translations. So we start with that, and we start early. We ask the development teams to include the localization team in all the pull requests with changes in the resource files or even just changes in the UI. In some cases, we have been able to successfully automate this step. So whenever the repository detects a pull request with changes in the resource files, we get automatically added as reviewers. We ask the developers to always include a screenshot highlighting the strings they are adding and where the changes are coming from. And also it's very important to ask questions about these strings so they can add comments to each of them. Remember, this webinar is everybody gets a screenshot. This is the first time that we get screenshots in the localization process. We take this one step further. After we provide feedback on the strings that we see, we basically look for consistency with our glossaries, making sure that the string is clear, concise, there is no room for ambiguity. And we also even are able to detect some layout issues that may occur. Sometimes it's not that difficult to spot strings that in English barely fit there, and you know that that is not going to work for the rest of the languages. In those cases, some of the testers, some of the developers, they test on the spot how long the string can be accommodated, and also they do that to demonstrate us that the UI container resizes accordingly. So by the time they check in these strings into the repository, they have been properly reviewed, and some of the potential layout issues have been addressed. Now we take this one step further, and we use the exact same screenshot, because everybody gets one, and send it as part of the translation package to our linguists. They are able to, in our TMS, we have set it up in a way that they are able to click on that little icon that you see on the left, and they will be able to see the full screen. So even them, they can see how much space they can have to play with, and whether there is some issue related to their own locale, they might even flag those issues right there. So at least when it comes to translations, we feel pretty confident, even if we don't have enough time to linguistic test before the release. But of course, it takes some time and some effort to add these steps into the localization cycle. Up to this point, this is not automated. The developers provide these screenshots, but we'll see how we do that. It would be impossible to manually take all these screenshots in all the languages. So Maybe we can have another poll, please, Isabella.
Okay, here it is. And the question is, are you currently using automation for linguistic testing purposes? Let's see. And the question is, the answer this time are very simple, yes or no. So let's see. So, okay. We're almost there. For now, we have 57% says no and 43% says yes. So let me just quickly show the results. Here they are.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not surprised because really, when you think about it, it takes some, I'm just going to close this. It takes a significant amount of effort to actually create the scripts that are going to localize navigating through your software. So let's talk about some of the pros and some of disadvantages we have identified when taking the decision to go for the automation for linguistic testing. One of the main advantages in our particular case is that we're able to reuse existing testing environments, meaning we don't have to pay an external engineer that sets up a testing environment where the testing team is. And remember that these testing environments are being used by the functional testing team and the system testing team. So they are very well set up. They calibrate the cameras to the point that we can actually see even different states in those cameras, which in our case translate in hardware states events. So we don't have to worry about the actual setup of the testing environment. It would be really time consuming if we were going to do it ourselves. As you saw, we're not a big team. I think I'm gonna borrow your joke, Jen. Jen says that we are a small but mighty team, and I agree with that. So it wouldn't be feasible for us trying to set up those testing environments. So we can actually reuse existing testing environments. One of the disadvantages, yes, it takes time to develop the scripts, and that is in part one of the reasons why, although we have the scripts in place before the release, we still have to execute those scripts, and the actual testing has to occur. So that's why sometimes we may have to release without a linguistic testing. In a way, it makes linguistic testing affordable. Long time ago, when I joined the company, at the time we have to, as in any other step of the business, you have to choose your battles. And at the time we were able to test, say, for example, only 7 languages. We have ACC. ACC is localized in 23 languages, but because of the cost of setting up the testing environments outside our building and the time that the tester took to execute the steps manually, we were able to afford only 7 languages. After we introduced automation, we are happy to say that for the same amount of money, the same cost, we're able to test every single language in ACC. So it makes it more cost efficient. Another disadvantage, I was talking about testers having to execute manually those steps. Unfortunately, when you are sending screenshots for linguistic testing, you don't really get that kind of feedback. The feedback that a human being going through a workflow is important. And unfortunately, we lose that by simply sending screenshots for testing. Increasing testing coverage. Another advantage, just by the way that we test, is easier and faster to test more strings compared to having to execute manual steps in order to see all the strings that we have to take a look in context. But of course, one of the main disadvantages, and again, this is not only for linguistic testing, but basically for any automated testing out there, it is not possible to cover all the strings just by automation. There are some cases that it's very difficult to trigger a string, and you simply cannot do it. You will need a human to change the state for, say, an NVR, a video recorder, in order to see certain string in the log file, for example. So there are certain strings that we cannot simply automate. So we have to do something else in that case. So since it takes time to develop these scripts, we have to make sure that the time that we use in automating our testing is well used. And to do that, we prioritize. That is something that is important. You have to choose your battles. You have to make sure where you get more back for your money, so to speak. We have we created 3 different priorities when it comes to strings. So for us, a high priority string is a string that is highly visible. Basically, any user of the software is going to see those strings by simply navigating through the UI. They don't even have to exercise any of the functionality for them to see those strings. So those strings are important, and the translations have to be very high quality. Also, sometimes we implement features that are important, and they are basically the main reason why we have a release. So we market that specific feature, and of course, it is important that the translations for that specific issue and the localization in general is flawless, or at least we try. And of course, escalations. From time to time, and I'm pretty sure some of you can relate, is our end user the one who reports an issue related to localization. And we need to fix those right away. And we need to make sure that those strings are all, not only the translations are better, but they also display correctly. So that is also considered a high priority. For medium priority, those are the strings that are visible only when some functionality in the software is executed. Say, for example, when we implement third-party support for some of the cameras, we need to change the configuration view for those specific cameras. At that point, the user has actually to interact with the software and make changes to it to see some of these views and some of these strings. We also consider warning messages, for example, medium priority. It is important that we present a warning to our users. The user understands exactly what may happen if he or she decides to take an action. And we also have low priority strings. Those are usually error messages for edge cases. In some cases, our developers have to introduce strings that we call the just in case strings. But they are clear, and they say, you know what, a user might never see these strings. We still have to translate it just in case. And we need to do some quality check even in those strings. We could also be strings that are visible only to a smaller group of users. For example, the log files are usually only important to the admin, and normally you would have only 1 or 2 admins in your system. Well, not in our enterprise version of our solutions, but I mean the group of people that may see those errors are smaller. And also, as you navigate through your software and you get to know your software, you know where are the spots where there is unlikely to be a layout issue. Either because we have plenty of real estate to display that string, or because historically there's never been an issue there. So as I said, we still check for those strings, but we take more of a linguistic review approach, which means we review those strings by using only the translations in the resource files. So once we have this priority, where do we focus our automation efforts the most? Of course, high priority strings. Those are the ones that we need to make sure that we have screenshots to cover them all. For the medium priority is based on best effort, right? Sometimes we might be running out of time. We just decide to review those strings as low priority, following the same low priority process. And I will let Jen to go into detail as how she maps these strings when she's designing these scripts.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Yes, I'll pass the mic to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Luz. Yeah, so wait, before we play the video, I just want to say, so, okay, Luz provided all of this great context as to why this is important for us and how we sort of allocate this priority. But now what I'm going to present with this video is what it actually means to automate for screenshots. So so we're going to take a look at this video and I'll talk as we go. So Luz, whenever you're ready. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm showing you empty folders right now. These folders are going to be populated a little bit later with the photos that we've taken. Now, in the command line, I'm running a script that I've created. And so this will launch our web application. So this simulates basically entry into our program. And it will select a language. So we'll see, we're going to go from Polish to English here. And then it goes to the page that we want to navigate to, and it takes a screenshot. Then it's going to continue and repeat those same steps with all of the 10 languages that we offer for this specific web application. So what we're doing here basically is we are eliminating the need for an individual person to go in and be doing all of this themselves, which, you know, it's for scalability really, because if you've got 2 languages, you know, it probably wouldn't be a huge deal for someone to go in and take those screenshots. But if you go upwards and constantly are growing and expanding, and some of our products go up to 24 languages, the time it would take to have someone go in and do that is mitigated. And not only that, but also to go in repeatedly on 24, do the same thing 24 times and take a screenshot, that is tedious work. Like no one really wants to do that. And so no single person has to click through all the languages to get there. So now it's continuing, it's saving those screenshots. What you don't see under the hood is basically that somewhere defined in the script, there's a location where these are saving. That location is the location I showed at the beginning of the script running. And that's where they're all going. So once again, just sort of as this wraps up, you're saving time and you're making your processes more scalable. And Polish is the last of our languages. So after this, we will see how the folders have been populated. So here we are. The script has stopped running. And now the folders have that picture that we talked about. And this is what we will send to the testers. All right, So Luz, we can go to the next slide now. Oh, perfect, great. All right, so this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure, so how to get set up for this. Then I'm going to talk about sort of the iterative processes of it, basically maintaining it as you work in an agile environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the limitations at the end. So we can jump right into the next slide. So the first thing you really want to do, if this is a path that you have decided, yes, I'm going to go down this path and this is something I want to do to make my processes more scalable and to make my processes more scalable. So the first thing is identifying the primary view. So when a user logs into your application, what do they see? What are the main pages that they will navigate to? What will they click on? And this will sort of inform test cases that you can build for, as Luz identified, the high priority views that we are starting with. So if we go to the next slide. So in this same application that we were looking at in this video, when we log in, this is what we see. So obviously the higher level tabs, so monitor, identities, reports, all of this stuff basically are things that the user are incredibly likely to click on. And each of these tabs then has a series of sub-tabs identified in yellow: events, search, alarms, and so on and so forth. And so these are also extremely high priority views because these are the things that our customers, our end users, will be clicking on readily. So next slide. Great. This is for a different product, but this is what a map of your UI might look like. So basically you have your user logs in at the very top, and these are the immediate pages they can navigate to. Then once they're at those pages, these are the main actions, or these are the main next pages or next views that they can go to, and so on and so forth. And that sort of sets up your pyramid of views as Luz identified it. So, okay, so you've decided now, okay, we want to set this up for ourselves. And you're really working with two options. So you can work to write these scripts, you can work within the code base that is already set up for your product, or you can create an independent testing framework. And there are pros and cons to both. So I'm going to go through each of them, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why we chose the one that we chose. So if you work with the code base that you already have, that your developers are in, you really maximize the existing infrastructure. So there's already probably methods and classes that are designed for you to be able to navigate to the places that you want to go to. On top of that, there's lots of people that you can ask for help as the code base is maintained. It is unlikely that the code base is maintained by you specifically. And so there's lots of help that you can pull in, and there's additional sort of maintenance work that you don't have to do. However, you are then contingent on the build compilation of that code base. And if any bugs sort of sift in, then you have no way to troubleshoot, and you're entirely sort of dependent on your company's developers to fix it in a timely manner. And if issues arise again, and if those issues arise, you rely on them. So let's talk a little bit about independent testing framework.
Next one.
Yeah, yes, please.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, for me, the real pro of an independent testing framework is autonomy. So basically, you won't be seeing bugs or compilation errors coming from anything else except from the stuff that you and your team have created. So that really mitigates the field of troubleshooting, because if you're working with a giant code base with a million different team or several different teams checking in different codes that relate to different features that relate to to different core elements, then you don't necessarily know what has gone wrong. Versus if you have your own testing infrastructure and something went wrong, the field of options for what that bug is fairly narrow, which is great. You have no external dependencies for compilation, and you can choose whatever tools and libraries you want because this is set up expressly for your purposes. Now, the cons of this is that there's a higher setup overhead because you're creating everything from scratch. The maintenance and adapting to change then becomes your responsibility, and you don't have that access from the pre-existing methods from the code base. And so we decided to create our own independent testing frameworks, and the reason we really did that is because the code bases that we work with are massive. So it is fairly common that there are build and compilation errors. So that did not make sense for us who have a fair amount of computer science experience on our team to create. So it made sense for us to create essentially these fast scripts that work for our purposes. So next slide, please, Liz. Great. So the automation that we've talked about we've really been talking about, well, for us, we really use them with web apps or desktop applications insofar. So how did we choose what tools we wanted to use? Well, Python is the language that we selected because it is incredibly user-friendly. So it's a high-level and object-based scripting language, but it's very convenient to use. And if anyone is jumping in with non-computer science expertise, which our team is a wide mix of, this is a fairly straightforward language to jump in with. And then Selenium is a set of tools that firmly supports the quick development of test automation of web applications. And it works really, really well with Python. It offers testing functions that are specifically designed to the requirements of testing a web application. So next slide, please, Liz. Perfect. This is just an example, a very simple example pulled from Browser Stack, but basically this is how to create a Selenium script that just runs the WebDriver, logs to the Python website, and then does some automation steps. So in this example, it enters the letter Q into the search bar, and it also enters getting started with Python in the search bar, and basically at the end of it, it closes it. So this is just a very minor example of what launching a script looks like. So one of the key things with automation and web automation is that you need to be able to identify elements so that you can interact with them. With Selenium, there are 4 ways to identify these elements. You can do so with their name, you can do so with their CSS ID, you can do them with their domain path, also called XPath, and you can do it with the CSS class. So in our experience, we've found the most robust is to do it with the IDs or the class, because the name can change with the language, and we have a method to sort of mitigate that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to desktop apps, because it's more important there, I would say. And XPath can change depending on how elements are shifted in your browser when coders are developing and putting things at different places on the web page. So great. So for desktop apps, we also use Python for the same reasons we did with web apps. However, We use Pywin Auto for desktop applications, which is a set of Python modules to automate the Microsoft Windows GUI. So we work mainly with Microsoft and Linux, which this is compatible with. This is not particularly compatible with Apple products. Or yeah, so so it allows for simple actions. So it allows you to send mouse and keyboard actions to dialogues and controls, but it also offers complex actions and which is like collecting data off of the page. And this is having that nice sort of portfolio of complexity really enables us to do all the things that we want to accomplish. Next slide, please. So Pywin Auto is often used in tandem with a GUI tool. This is a tool that helps you identify the different elements on your desktop application. We used Inspect. This has worked for us. Basically, you get a list of different elements that are on the page and how you can interact with them, and a lot of the features of the different elements. You also get additional information like the mouse coordinates of these elements and so on and so forth. So great. So this is, there's also a method in Pywin Auto that lets you print the control identifiers. This will provide a list of control identifiers. And basically for one of the great things about Pywin Auto is it uses what's called magic attributes names. So it means that everything doesn't have to be perfect and exact in a sense. Basically, it can work with titles or control elements to find the elements that you are looking for. So if there is an OK button, in this example, as long as either the title or the control type is OK button, you should be able to interact with it fairly easily. I talked about, I talked a little bit earlier about mitigating working with names and titles, because those are often pulled from the UI, and in English there'll be one thing, but in French there'll be another, and in Spanish there'll be another, and so on and so forth, basically because they're translated in all of these different languages. But there is a way to mitigate that, and Luz, if you bring us to the next slide. So here, basically what we've done is on the right-hand side, we've created a method that localizes the string. So it reads the string off of the UI and goes into the resource file and finds the equivalent for the language that we are in our desktop application. So for example, if the word is OK from the OK button, it will then go through the files that you have downloaded on your computer, the resource files that you have downloaded on your computer as part of that desktop application, and find the equivalent and return it to you. And so basically what it takes in is it takes in the string, and it takes in whatever language you are in this interface at this time. And then yeah, and basically, as we can see on the left-hand side, so this is an example of calling that method. Basically, so in the last of the 4 lines, ACC window, best match close button. So first of all, that's what I talked about, the magic attributes. As long as it's relatively close, it will find that. And then the close button that we've defined, that's the method that we've called to translate the word close. So Luz, next slide, please. So what you need, whether it's desktop applications, whether it's web applications, what are some common methods that you need to get started? Well, first you need sort of methods that will directly interact with your application, in the sense that they will launch it, they will log in, they will select the language, and they will take the screenshot. These are the 4 basic methods that you need. And for taking screenshots, there are various libraries you can use. I commonly use Screenshot. I've also seen PyAuto GUI been used. Really, whatever you need to get the full picture and save that full picture in the future set for testing. And then the second one is manipulating elements in some way. And so these are some of the most common ones that we've had to do, which is hovering over elements for a tooltip to be revealed, clicking on something, sending keys. Like sometimes, you know, if an error message is this password is too short, you still need to send a couple of keys to trigger that message. So that's an example of that. Selecting items from a dropdown is fairly common as well. So yeah, so those are what I recommend to get started. So now you have this infrastructure in place. You've decided, okay, for us, we've decided to create our own independent testing framework. We've written scripts for our high priority views. Now, how do we keep it agile? How do we keep it in pace with the agile development cycle? So one of the things Luz identified earlier in the presentation that's incredibly important is collecting the English version of that screenshot as early as possible in those pull requests where the developers are checking in the English strings, because while those strings are being sent for translation, here are some things that you can do. You can collect the steps onto how to reach to that window. You can write the script because you know how to get there in English already. So you can write the script. There's no need to wait until the translations are back to do this work. And then so that by the time the translations come back, you can just run that script that you've created, and it'll take a bunch of pictures basically, and there will be slim to no delay time, which is really the ideal for in an agile setting like this. So what are our limitations? Well, so writing the script itself is a manual process. So you really sort of need to weigh that trade-off of, as I said, for 2 languages, it may just be faster for someone to go in and take those couple of screenshots, but it's not scalable. And if you have, upwards of 10 languages, it becomes unsustainable. Running the script is a manual process, so it's not automatically triggered by, say, the translations returning, at least not at this point. So you do need someone to, whether you've created a UI for running your scripts or you do it in the command line like we do, that is a small, but it is still a manual step. And also the readiness of the scripts depend on that early access of strings. So if you don't get that information on where that string lives and how to get there and what it looks like in context, then it'll take, you'll have to add that scripting time after you've received the information that you needed. So path forward. So and I've seen some questions pop up about this in the chat as I've been speaking about how do we do this for mobile applications? And that's sort of next on our checklist. We do have lots of mobile products, and we want to examine how examine how we could achieve this moving forward for our mobile platform. But basically, it would be the same way that we've sort of done our research and development for these two. Basically, we would look at which are the most sort of intuitive what are the most intuitive ways to test this so that it's ease of use for the person who's creating and running the scripts. What is most intuitive for the mobile devices that we are testing? So for example, Python and Selenium, we know work really well together to do web apps. And then the other thing is for the mobile apps, I don't think you would be able well, okay, I don't want to say I don't think you would be able to. You can do anything, but what you would probably have some sort of on your computer UI that looks that mimics the cell phone. I've seen a lot of testers use these with mobile devices where they have, they've created an iPhone, like they have an iPhone 12, for example, that shows up on their desktop screen, and you would run the automation through that rather than on your actual device itself. And the benefit with that is that a lot of these UIs that are designated to mimic these different phones, I currently forget the name of the one that I'm thinking of, but is that you have a list of devices that you can choose from. So you could choose it. So you could use that automation, not just for the languages, but also for the different devices, because obviously, I just got you can have an iPhone 12 mini, for example, which is much smaller than an iPhone 12. And so the how the strings are displayed, might differ. So that's sort of our next course of investigation. Maybe stay tuned end of 2022 and we'll present again, who's to say. And then possibly creating the automation of triggers. So recently we've automated a lot of our sort of linguistic like translation workflows. I wonder if there's a way to sort of, when the translations come back, I wonder if there's area for research to launch those triggers automatically. I think this is I've sort of been going on, but I think this brings us to the Q&A. So I see lots of questions popping up.
Yes, exactly. First of all, thank you, Luz and Geneviève. That was really interesting. I see there are a lot of questions, but before we go and read them out loud, if there's anyone among the attendees who would like to ask the questions directly, just raise your hand and we can open the microphone and you can talk directly to Luz and Geneviève. So don't be shy, basically. So there were a couple of questions already in the chat. For example, let me see, Michelle is writing, what if you don't have a web application, but a traditional desktop application on Windows?
Yeah, so that's so part of that was using so Python can still use for scripting, and PyWin Auto is what we used specifically with that, sort of in tandem with the inspect tool.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, then Angel had a couple of questions. Let's see, first of all, what is your TMS? I think in the beginning you started showing the process.
Yes, and are we allowed to say that information? Is that okay? We don't mind, but yeah, we use XTM.
Unless it's, okay.
Yeah, we use XTM. Yeah.
And then how do you provide the screenshots for the reviewer or the tester in the segmented TMS translation environment, or as part of the testing process?
Well, that's two different parts. The screenshots that we provide in the TMS are meant to be used by the translators. And for the linguistic testers themselves, we have a share drives, and we just post everything there, from the test plan to the screenshots in all the languages. And if I remember correctly, they have their own tool that displays both the source language screenshot and the target language screenshot. So one of the requirements to take these screenshots is that, and the reason why we have them in separated folders is because they all have to have the exact same name. So if you have login in English, login.png, you need to have login.png in French as well, because that's how their tool works.
Okay. Another question.
Just to jump off of that, and that's something that we create in the script. So as we take a picture of that login page, there's a line that says save this as login.png, regardless of the language.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And another question, with an independent testing framework, do you have limitations on what you can do to interact with the software being tested? Who wants to take this?
I think that's a question for me, and I think so. There are some limitations. So if there is a radical overhaul of the UI, then one of the limitations is that we need to then adapt all of our scripts to mirror this. This being said, there are ways to mitigate that, and that is so avoid basically good coding practice, which is avoiding duplication of code. So we create the methods that navigate through our UI. And so, for example, if there's you know, sort of step one is logging in, step two is going to screen A, and step three is sending the word hello. So those are the three scripts. We have one method that's used to log in, and then to go to screen A, that calls the login method, and then to enter those words on that screen, it calls the methods prior. So if there is an overhaul of the UI, since we've made these parts sort of atomic, you only need to change them in one place. So I would say those are those are some limitations. I mean, and other limitations I've sort of identified just a little bit, which is we can't tap in, like if we use our independent structure, although we can base some of our methods from the code base itself, we can't just, you know, it's not pre-made for us. So we do have to spend that time and effort creating it.
Okay, we have 3 minutes and loads of questions. So, so another question from Angel: do you do visual review and functional testing for the mobile apps?
There is definitely one team dedicated to do functional testing, and they do some very minimum localization testing. But we definitely make a point to do the linguistic testing. And as Jen mentioned, this is something that we haven't automated yet. But we definitely do linguistic testing as well.
Yeah, so what we provide them with is we provide them with our mobile environment and the steps that all of the different testers need to follow. So you know, there will be one tester per language, and that tester will follow those steps manually.
Okay, you mentioned some tools, Geneviève, Selenium, and I think Pywin Auto. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah.
So can you give some information, maybe if there's a training somewhere, or is that an industry standard? The questions are from Michelle.
Yeah, so there are definitely trainings. I think there are definitely trainings. I've seen like Udemy maybe offer a Python Selenium course. I think actually someone on our team might have taken that course. Sometimes on LinkedIn Learning, there's shorter courses. Yeah, so there are definitely trainings available for this.
Okay, and do you happen to know the cost? Maybe they can look it up, but if you remember vaguely.
I sort of vaguely.
Are they affordable or?
Yeah, I sort of vaguely remember the Python Selenium training being between $100 to $200, right, somewhere in that range.
Okay,
but in addition to that, there are so many free tutorials out there, especially for Python.
Yeah,
and because it's open source, you can actually also contribute to it. And there are so many forums, developers forums. So if you have a problem, somebody you can bet your life, somebody had that same problem and somehow it got solved. So yeah, if it was up to me, I would start with a free tutorial. And then as you advance and get to a certain level, then you can think of paying one, I guess. Okay,
very quickly, I see that Michelle raised his hand. So we only have a couple of minutes left, but Michelle, go ahead if you want to ask your question directly to Geneviève and Luz.
On the cost, I was wondering not so much about the cost of the training, but the cost of the tools themselves.
Oh, Python is free to use. Selenium is free to use. PyWin Auto is free to use.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep.
Cost of $0.
We like that.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. What bug reporting system do your testers use?
We can also say that, right, Jira?
Okay.
I
Yes,
don't know,
you're
yeah,
allowed
'cause-
to say.
okay, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we are at the end of the webinar. Before you all log off, just stay online, because when I close the webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey. And so it'll take you literally 10 seconds to fill it in and let Luz and Jen know how great their presentation was. And also let us know which topics you're interested in so that we can refine our webinar program. So thank you, Luz, and thank you, Geneviève. You've been great. Thank you to all attendees. It was a really interesting presentation. Now we have 2 more webinars before the end of the year here at Gala. Next week, we have critical decisions for project managers to make in subtitling and dubbing projects. Will be presented by the Video Localized team. And on December 16, we have a follow-up webinar on the collaboration between translation buyers and language service providers, with Soren Eberhardt from Microsoft, Diego Crescieri from Creative Words, and Jose Palomares from Coupa Software.
Yeah.
But until then, I wish you all a very good day or a very good evening, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you soon at another Gala webinar. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Isabella.
everybody.
Bye.